Want to get right up on top of this thing. All right, thanks for coming, folks. My name is Jeff. I am an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is August 18th of 2019. And I want to start out by saying, thank you. Thank you for letting me do this. Thank you to the people that come here to do service work, to the people that keep this place clean, people that chair meetings, people that lead tables. Thank you to the people on the board. Thank you to the paying members that help keep this place going. And very special thanks to two outstanding individuals, Eric and Greg, who just do a tremendous amount of service work, and they've done a lot for my recovery. So thank you. Now that being said, there's one small thing I need to cover before I get into the open talk, part of my open talk, and that is, apparently, last time I spoke, there were some people who complained about my open talk. No, seriously, it happened. And I didn't take it personally. In fact, when I heard about it, I thought to myself, that's hilarious, and I'm glad that happened. But I wanted to make an amends just the same, and out of respect to Eric, I'm going to do things differently tonight. And for those of you new to recovery, I want to explain that an amends is not an apology. Amends are changed behaviors, and so these are the behaviors I'm going to change tonight. Tonight, I'm going to swear less than I did last time. I'm still going to swear, but I'm going to swear less. Second, I'm going to try to stay on point and try to keep my share more related to directly how it relates to alcoholism. And third, I'm going to talk less about my abuse traumas, and hopefully that appeases whoever complained. I'm not really sure what it was all about, but I do respect that, there's a lot of gingers here, and we don't want to hurt any feelings. And so, I'm going to try to improve on my last one, and I just want you all to know that, that means I made my amends, so you make your amends. No complaints, please. Right? And you're now under my protection.
Want my money back.
Now, I want to explain what protection means. For those of you who don't have a criminal history or may not be familiar with the term, protection means this. You keep your fucking mouth shut, and nothing bad will happen to you. Right? How am I doing, Dennis? Dennis threatened me earlier. He told me if my open talk was boring, he was going to throw stuff at me. And so I'm trying to keep it entertaining this time. But seriously, Dennis is a good friend, and he's always keeping an eye out for me, so thank you, Dennis. Okay, let's get into it. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. Well, you've just gotten a taste of a little bit of what I'm like now, but I assure you there was a time that I was much worse. So for those of you who had healthy upbringings and decent families and stuff, I am happy for you. I genuinely am, and I wish that were my case. It was not. Frankly, my childhood was an absolute nightmare. I come from a family of 6 kids, and every one of the kids in my family ended up with addictions and mental health issues. And I have to give credit where credit is due, not to pass blame, but as a point of cause and effect. My parents were very sick, unhappy people. My mother was a very negative, judgmental, bitter, angry person who could suck the joy out of anything, and she often did. And it got to the point where I just stopped sharing things with her because no matter what I told her, no matter what I said, she'd find something wrong with it. And my father was no better. My father was a dry, drunk alcoholic who beat his sons and molested his daughters. And between the two of them and my three older siblings, the beatings and the abuse was pretty epic. And by the time I was in my teens, I was so sick that even my sick parents decided that I needed help. And I got pushed into treatment, and after I told the therapist some of the things that were going on with me, it was decided that I would receive hypnotherapy to help me block out the memories of childhood abuse that were crippling me. I wasn't able to cope, I wasn't functioning at all. And I guess I should be grateful because it helped. And I went my entire adult life with no awareness of several years of childhood abuse, and it was a blessing. I was able to cope better after I had that hypnotherapy. But I still had problems. And I've pretty much always been a criminal. I was stealing as soon as I had hands, and I committed my first felonies in elementary school. And I had all kinds of friends, but my closest friends were criminals, and the best times in my life were making those guys laugh, taking things too far and getting in trouble. And I know that's probably sad for a lot of people to hear that, but it's true. And I was an alcoholic. And I was an alcoholic before I took my first drink. That much I'm sure of. And I'm grateful for recovery because I learned it here that alcoholism is not a substance disorder, it's a thinking disorder. I think like an alcoholic. And a lot of my share is going to be directed towards the newcomers so that you guys can, get the education that I've received. And I want to explain what that means. Thinking like an alcoholic means I have a hard time letting things go. I have a hard time processing grief, and I tend to hold on to my past traumas, which Alcoholics Anonymous neatly describes as resentments and character defects. And for most of my life, I have been just a resentment factory, just building up all kinds of rage and acting out on the world. And so from my very first drinking experience, I was a problem drinker. And what had happened is this. I had some friends over to the house. My parents went out of town for the day, and they said I could have some friends over. And so there was an album out at the time. Maybe some of you are old enough to remember this thing called Cheech and Chong's Big Bamboo. And inside the folds of that album cover was a big rolling paper. And so I went out and bought myself an ounce of weed and rolled that up. And me and my friends smoked it. And as soon as the weed was gone, so were my friends. But I was left with my one alcoholic friend. And he and I split a fifth of El Toro tequila and washed it down with a six-pack of warm Michelob beer. Delicious, delicious, Because nothing goes better with crappy, low-quality tequila than piss-warm beer. It's delicious. But from the very first time I drank, I was not going for the flavor. I was going for the effect. I was trying to get drunk. And he and I did. And we got so hammered, we stumbled up the street and fell asleep on the neighbor's lawn. And when we woke up, we were sunburned, because when we dropped there underneath the tree, there was shade, and then when we woke up, there wasn't. And I spent the whole next day sick as hell, thinking, well, that was pretty fun, but I got to figure out how to get drunk without getting sick. A very alcoholic thought. And I'll have you know, I never did figure that out. I'm not going to say that I got sick every time, but I got sick too many times, and I got very sick, and I'm hypoglycemic, and technically I should never drink. But I would, and then I would spend sometimes 1 or 2 days vomiting bile because I had done so much damage to my stomach lining drinking too much. I think they call that alcohol poisoning. And I did that at least 9 times in my life, and I'm grateful I never have to do that again. I never have to do that again. Now, my first introduction to AA was around 1989. I was hanging out at a place called the Northwest Alano Club when it was down on Farmington Road. And a friend of mine was in recovery, and he introduced me to that place. And I was hanging out at an AA recovery dance, listening to the disc jockey, and I thought to myself, she kind of sucks. I think I could do better than that. And so I started up a mobile disc jockey service. And he and I started it. He helped get me into the place, and after I did a couple gigs with him, I fired him because I'm a control freak. And then I kept doing it, and so I started out this great DJ career doing recovery dances. And before the dances, there would be meetings and open talks, and I'd sit in and I'd listen to the alcoholics, and I thought to myself, well, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not as bad as these guys. And that was my excuse to not go to AA. Instead, what I did is I fell in love with an alcoholic, and she was going to meetings there, and we became engaged, and I bought her a leather jacket, and then she dumped me. And this was before I knew what a trauma bond was, what the toxic cycle was, and codependency. And her mother suggested that I get myself into Al-Anon. And so I did, because I thought that if I went to Al-Anon, I'd be able to get her back. That didn't happen, but I did start to get better in Al-Anon, and I got about 3 years in, and I learned some stuff about the program, and I thought I was doing better, and I attracted another woman into my life, and she and I got married, so I figured, well, I guess I don't need Al-Anon anymore, I'm cured, right? I must be cured because now I got the woman, so, I stopped going to meetings. And I had also stopped drinking at that time, and I went and had myself a nice 11-year dry drunk. And she and I ran the mobile disc jockey service together, and then we had a son. And when he was about 2 years old, I found out the hard way that I have zero parenting skills and I'm a shitty husband. Now, I didn't think that at the time. At the time, I thought that it was all her fault, that she was a lying, cheating so-and-so, and to hell with her. And I started drinking towards the end of the marriage, and then I stayed drunk for about a year. I drank a fifth of whiskey almost every night for a year. And after I don't know what it was, after I killed enough brain cells or something, I decided, well, I'm going to get married again. And so I changed addictions. I put down the bottle and I started shopping for a new wife. And this time I was going to do it right, because the problem was I married the wrong kind of woman. That's what it was. There wasn't anything wrong with me. It's the wrong kind of woman. She was too much fun. She was too outgoing. She was too energetic. She was just too great. And so I needed the exact opposite of that. And I went to the other side of the planet. And on Yahoo Personals, I met a beautiful, a lovely Malaysian Muslim girl, very conservative, very devout Muslim. I converted to Islam. I flew there and proposed after we had been dating for several months online. And then 6 months later, I flew back and we were married. And she moved here for about 2 months, at which time she became pregnant. And after 2 months, she figured out that I lied to her. That I did not convert to Islam. I was experimenting with Islam. I was giving it a try, and I was getting away with as much as I could. So I didn't practice the wudu and salat 5 times a day. I was lazy and dysfunctional like I've always been, and so I would just occasionally pray. And she was very devout, and she wanted the best for our son, so she left me. So would you believe, after she left me, I started drinking again. I know, hard to swallow. So I started drinking again, and then I started sleeping around, and I did a whole bunch of things that I regret. I spent a lot of time with ladies that I would have never spent any time with if I hadn't been drinking, and I regret every one of those. And so I stopped doing that. And then the woman that I fell in love with back in 1989 found me on Facebook, and we started dating again. Again, no awareness of the toxic cycle, no awareness of trauma bonding. I had no idea that I was addicted to this woman. And so we were engaged 3 more times, and she ditched me 3 more times. And finally, I got back into Al-Anon for the right reasons. And I started taking it seriously, and it started working for me, and I was doing well, and I wrote this recovery guide that's back on the shelf there. And it was based on, the recovery I'd experienced in Al-Anon. It's a great fellowship, and thank you to my sponsor, Don, if you're listening tonight. And then something really horrible happened. So in 2017, in May, my father passed away. And he and I were close. And I was fully unaware of the fact that he died with a resentment towards me. And that he and my sisters had plotted and decided to cut me out of the family estate. I wasn't allowed to participate, which was ludicrous because I'm a remodel contractor and the house needed a ton of work, and a house that's worth $360,000 today ended up selling for $160,000 at the hands of my two sisters because they wouldn't let me fix the place. I didn't find out until 4 years later, until 4 years after he passed, that's what the deal was. For 4 years, I kept thinking that I'm going to get in there, and eventually I'm going to get in and fix the place, and I was counting on that money. I was counting on it as college money for my kids. But it didn't happen, and I got really sick waiting for that. But what happened that really messed me up was one evening in September of 2017, my older sister, who's mentally ill, and this was before I understood what narcissistic personality disorder was and before I knew what gaslighting was. My sister came into my home and she was gloating over the fact that she had taken over the estate. And she got herself a nice 4-year free ride at the expense of the family. But at the time, she was just, I had her over for dinner, and she started messing with my head and saying things that just didn't make sense at all. And at one point, I was complaining about how my sciatic nerve was bothering me. And if you don't know, sciatic nerve is the result of having back problems, and it's a pain that starts like in your ass and goes all the way down your legs, sometimes into your feet. And I was complaining about that, and then she said something to me that screwed me up. She offered to give me a massage. And I thought at the time, what the hell are you talking about? We don't have that kind of relationship. You're not going to put your hands on me. And she left. And I was triggered badly. I was beside myself. I was experiencing just horrible feelings, and I'm like, man, this is familiar. This happened to me before. And I started digging around in the past, and it was weird because I couldn't seem to remember anything. But I got really obsessive about it, and over the course of 10 nights, I slowly uncovered all the memories of childhood abuse that had been blocked out by hypnotherapy. I undid the treatment I received. And now it's a complete mess. Now I was suddenly in my 50s forced to deal with horrible childhood traumas that I had not have thought about at all through my entire adult life. And thank God I was still in Al-Anon. Thank God I was still in recovery at the time, and I reached out to professionals in every direction, and they failed me. And I went crazy. I started attacking people. I started getting nasty with people, and I started punishing anybody and everybody who disrespected me in the slightest way. And I did that for a number of years. I have a therapist with a restraining order against me. I get a police escort when I go to friend of the court because I threatened a judge. I have at least 20 police reports, people begging me to leave them alone, and the police having to tell me. And my sister is in hiding from me. The attorneys involved in the estate made sure that I couldn't find out where she lives, and I'm leaving it that way because it's best. But what's worse is I stopped being able to function. I stopped being able to cope. I was filled with trauma. I was manic. I was filled with rage, and I was having massive mood swings, and I couldn't deal with even my job anymore, and I started selling off my things to try to save my credit. I started with my tools and then my possessions, and then I ended up selling off my house, which I wish I didn't do. I didn't really need to do that, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I sold off my home, and I had to start moving around. And I'd move and start a new job, and then I'd blow up at people and get into trouble and end up packing up my stuff in the middle of the night and moving somewhere else. And I had that happen several times where I just destroyed the entire environment and had to leave in the middle of the night. And on one such occasion, I was staying at a Red Roof Inn over on Plymouth Road there. And I was hanging out in the middle of the day with a guy, and the two of us were drinking. And he was looking for a place to live himself, and he took pity on me, and he took me in. And he ended up drinking himself to death. You know, and I found him 4 days after he died because I was afraid of him. He was a really hostile guy, and I didn't want to look into it. And I figured out that he had passed when I heard his dog scratching at his bedroom door. But while I was staying with him, I was still in Al-Anon, and over the course of a few nights, I was celebrating. I was celebrating how spiritually fit I was and how I had embraced recovery so well that now I could control my drinking. And I went out and bought myself a fifth of Absolute, and for 2 nights in a row, I sipped out of the bottle and went to bed. And I pat myself on the back and I did it. I can control my drinking. On the third night, I don't know what happened because I blacked out and I polished off the bottle and I woke up sick as hell, and it finally hit me. I can't control my drinking. And it hit me hard. It's like the whole house of cards fell down. I was so full of shit. I was absolutely as bad as everybody else that I had been judging all those years, especially going to Al-Anon meetings, sitting there listening to people talk about their alcoholics, and me thinking, those guys are really screwing up, and then I'd go home and get hammered. I was living alone. I was getting away with it. And now the curtain was gone, and I was exposed. And it hit me so hard, I realized I can't do this anymore. And that was the blessing of hitting bottom. I had many bottoms. I had many times that I was sick from alcohol. Many, many times that I swore I'd never do it again. But that last time, when I realized how full of shit I was, I finally put down the bottle. Now the funny thing is, I was already scheduled to do an open talk here at that time. Before I stopped drinking, I scheduled an open talk here. Because I had been in recovery for so long, I just wanted to do an open talk. And I did my first open talk with 30 days sober. And I admit that I pulled a little fast one on Greg, and I didn't bother telling him what recovery program I was here to talk about. And so with my tail between my legs, I came in here and did my first open talk with 30 days sober. And as Eric says, I did an open talk, and then I never left. And it's amazing. I really found exactly what I needed to here, you know. And I feel like I'm one of the few people that gets into AA that, you know, when I started coming, when I had that moment of surrender, when I realized that, you know, I have a problem and I need help, my thought wasn't, oh my God, what am I going to do? My thought was, thank God I can finally start going to AA. And so, that's what happened. How am I today? Well, I'm doing a lot better than I was the last time I stood up here. And I have AA to thank for it a lot, but I did have some pretty complicated traumas, and the last time I stood up here, I was trash talking the professionals, how I was never going to do that again. And I heard myself say those things, and I thought, well, never say never. And I was desperate. And I had stopped coming here for about a little over a year because I was blowing up at people still. I was still having really bad bipolar episodes, attacking people, getting into fights. And I didn't want to get banned. I didn't want to get kicked out of here because I really liked this place. And so I decided to do whatever it took, and I started trying other options. And I went to a clinic, and I got myself a new psychiatrist and a new therapist, and here's what happened with that. First, now with the psychiatrist, I became willing to take meds, and they tell you the general explanation is that you have a chemical imbalance. And so I think, well, chemical imbalance, and there must be some type of test for that, test and see what chemicals are off, and then you give me those. Maybe MRI, maybe blood tests, whatever. I don't know, I'm not a doctor. But my psychiatrist was amazing. In a 10-minute conversation over the phone, he was able to prescribe some medication. I thought, wow, that is really something. Telepathic microscopes. And so I started taking those pills, and I took them for about 3 weeks until I ran out, and there was no follow-up from him, and then the therapist dropped the ball. So I go into the therapist, and she was my case manager, and she decided that she was going to help me out personally. And I guess I should have been flattered. But then I explained to her, my problems. I have PTSD, I got bipolar disorder, I am filled with rage, I wake up every day wanting to hurt people. I am severely codependent, and I keep screwing up my life, doing favors I can't afford for assholes that don't care about me at all. And I am, at the end of it, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep ruining my life doing favors for people that don't care about me. And I got to figure this stuff out. And for those of you who don't know, codependency is the result of childhood abandonment issues. That if you have somebody, if someone's emotionally unavailable for you in childhood, then you tend to overcompensate as an adult trying to get what you couldn't get as a child. I thought she would know. And whatever, she took on my case, and then out of the 15 appointments that I set up with her, she missed 8 of them. And I took that as a sign. I said, well, that's a pretty clear sign. This is not working out for me. Now, please understand, I'm not trying to talk anybody out of therapy or psychiatry. If those things are working for you, everybody's recovery is different. Do what is working for you. Don't let me talk you out of anything. I'm just telling you what happened with me. And what happened with me is I've gotten to the point where I'm not at all interested in therapy. I think it was a complete waste of my time because I've been to 9 different therapists throughout my life. Every time I was willing to change, every time I was willing to listen, every time I was looking for answers, and I wasted hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, and hundreds of hours trying to get the answers that I ended up finding in AA. And it was simple. It was simple. Resentments and character defects are killing me. Now, the Webster's definition of resentment is really not that clear. I don't think it's conducive to recovery, so I want to expand on it a little, what I feel it is. Resentment is a resentment. It's whenever you think about something, if it continues to upset you in any way, if it makes you angry or depressed, that's a resentment. And character defects are the reasons why we hold on to those. I'll give you an example. I've got a young guy who worked for me who I'm still pissed off at. And this was before I knew, again, what narcissism was and how severe my codependency was and toxic cycle and all that. And he worked for me for like 11 years, and I enabled him. I enabled him a lot. I did free work for him. I bought materials for his homes that he lost. I bought things for him. I took money out of a nice, safe money market account and loaned him thousands of dollars so that he could do a startup business, and he was going to pay me back with interest and profits. And then when I needed the money the most, when I got sick, I asked him for it, and he made a big joke out of it, and he wouldn't pay me back. So that's the resentment. The resentment is I loaned a bunch of money and gave a bunch of help to this guy who's not going to pay me back. Now, the character defects are he's a lying, cheating, backstabbing, narcissistic asshole, right? Well, we have this great expression in recovery. If you spot it, you got it. So when we're judging other people, we're really not judging them. We're seeing ourselves in them. And if those are things that we don't like about ourselves, then we hate them for reminding us of ourselves. That's how it really works. So I have all those qualities. I'm a lying, cheating, backstabbing, narcissistic asshole. I am. This is the cure. Standing up here and admitting it in front of a bunch of people. I teach myself how to accept myself for those things. And then I can stop being angry at him because he's the same way as I am. You know? Maybe I'm not acting that way right now, but it's definitely something that's within me. It's definitely some quality about me. And Dr. John Bradshaw refers to these things as our disowned parts. And so in recovery, we need to learn how to take these disowned parts and love them back into ourselves. Be willing to admit that I'm flawed. I have difficulties. I have things that I'm still working on. And I do still have resentments, and I do still have these character defects, but I did also finally run into one professional that changed things for me quite a bit. So I'm on Facebook, and I'm in one of these spiritual groups, which normally I get kicked out of for mouthing off to people. And I met this wonderful woman, a lovely Filipino woman living in Belgium, who happened to be a trauma specialist. And we hit it off because we agreed on a couple things. First, we agreed on my concept of grieving, which is that you cannot reach acceptance unless you let something go. And the second thing was we have the same kind of belief about the concept of ego. I'm more of a Taoist, Buddhist version of ego. I'm fully against the Freudian overcomplicated nonsense. And we got along on these two paths, and we became friends. And then one day she offered me unsolicited advice on my Facebook page, which is one of my biggest triggers, and I ripped her apart. I tore into her. I gave her a horrible review on Facebook, and then I sent her an email, and I took her inventory, and I told her exactly what I thought of her unsolicited advice, and I hurt her. I hurt her. And it took her several days to get back to me. And when she did, she showed me what kind of a person she really was. She showed me kindness. And she said to me, "Jeff, I understand. I know you're hurting. I know you've been through too much. And I've been through a lot of traumas myself, and so I get it. I get it. And I'm not going to give you unsolicited advice again, but please don't ever talk to me like that again." I said, "Okay, I'm sorry." And then I took a shot in the dark, and I said, "You really impressed me. You really know how to handle me, because I am a handful. And I wish I could afford you. I wish I could afford you, because I can tell you're probably really good at what you do." And she did me a favor, and she gave me free treatment. And so we met several times on Zoom. And then she put together some custom recordings for me, some guided meditations to help me deal with my anger issues. And another one to help me balance my chakras. Some of you might know what that means. And then we did a third one together that I actually scripted, and then she added to it and recorded it. And then I took it and turned it into a video and posted it on my YouTube channel. And now it's out there to help everybody for free. It's a guided meditation to help you heal your resentments. And I listen to these things all the time. And it changed my life. And I went from waking up wanting to murder people to waking up thinking, oh, that guy's kind of a jerk. You know, and in a very short period of time. And it was this process she used called rapid transformation therapy. Now, again, I have to give AA full credit for teaching me what was wrong with me. So even my severe traumas were deeply rooted in my alcoholic thinking. But then I needed to get some specialized help because my traumas were kind of complicated and exaggerated. And, you know, she helped me a lot, and this place helped me a lot. And so I want to end the same way I started, with gratitude. Thank you.